Make sure we're double recording.
Yeah, exactly.
So you guys, you moved out of Levine, right? Where did you guys go?
Downtown. Well, just north of downtown.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. So like kind of in the older district there?
Yeah.
Not older, but like the
Yeah.
historic,
Yeah,
I guess they call it that.
Yeah. Kind of irrigated lots, kind of along Central Avenue.
Right. Yeah. No, that's great. Didn't Heidi buy a place up there like 5 years ago?
Yeah, she's nearby. Brad's nearby. Yeah.
Oh, are they? Okay. Cool.
Not like around the corner, but yeah, within a mile or two.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
Good place to be. You should come back to Phoenix.
I should come back to Phoenix. I know, right?
Yeah.
For those that are just hopping on, Jake and I used to be neighbors-ish, so we've known each other for a few years.
No love.
Right.
No.
Well, let's go ahead and get started. For everyone that's jumped in, and then for those that will come in the future, my name is Jesse Randall, and I am the CEO and founder of Sweater, and our objective is to open up the venture capital asset class to the general public. As you can imagine, we've got a lot of hurdles that we're going through and navigating with the SEC, which is a long and arduous process. So in the meantime, we decided that we wanted to add some value to all the founders in the world that are either in the middle of the trenches or are thinking about jumping in, to help communicate and see what it's really like to start a company. And we decided to focus in on that stage before you get funded and everything you have to do to really get a company from purely an idea on the back of a napkin to a point where it can be sustained on its own or even grow with the help of outside capital partners. So today I'm really excited to have Jake Findlay with us, who's the founder and CEO of Fullbay. So Jake, welcome.
Hey, Jesse. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to tell your story here. I remember just, nostalgically, I remember first hearing that you were working on a fintech product. This was probably at least 5 years ago. And actually not a fintech, excuse me, working on a software company about 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I kind of wondered, I'm like, oh, I wonder what Jake's working on. And I didn't really get into it until about 2 years ago when I knew that you were a lot further down the path. So I know that you have an awesome story in this, but I thought maybe let's start off with you kind of giving an idea, give a quick pitch to everyone so they know what Fullbay is and kind of what the scope is of what you do and what you've achieved to date. So kind of a, scope of operations or, however you want to measure yourself.
Sure. Well, the thesis was basically to build a medical record for trucks and heavy equipment. But what Fullbay is, it's a platform for running a commercial repair facility. And most of us know these as like a truck repair shop where like a semi truck is repaired or trailers or any kind of commercial equipment. So we've grown, and it has been 5 years since we started selling. We've grown to be by far the biggest software platform for running a commercial repair facility in North America. And that was kind of the idea. So I know we'll probably get into it more, but my background is prior to this was mostly in electronic medical records. So the idea was to kind of take some of those good ideas that maybe some were seeing the light of day and maybe some weren't because of HIPAA and other reasons, and apply them in a different vertical, apply them in truck repair. And so far, so good.
Yeah, that's awesome. So give us an idea of kind of how do you measure the reach of the company right now? I mean, do you measure it in terms of number of shops or like throughput with trucks? Like, how do you measure that?
Yeah, so both. So number of shops, we keep that number very close to the vest.
Fair enough.
But it's pretty good. I can say that we're in all 50 states, 8 Canadian provinces. We're in Australia, and continuing to march forth kind of in that pattern. And it's going really well. We have a great response from the vertical. We were lucky to get a product market fit very early, and then just really dial up sales. And yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, fantastic. So, looking, if we can go back in time, I like to go back and think about that back of napkin moment. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned that, things shifted a little bit, but let's examine that a little bit more. So what was that initial idea? Where did it come from? You have your EMR background and all that kind of stuff. So is that really where it stemmed from, or did someone else bring that idea, to you and you developed it together? What was that like?
Yeah. So maybe I can just back up and talk about my background. So I studied accounting in school and worked for a couple of public accounting firms. So I was with Deloitte & Touche and then Ernst & Young. And my plan was to become an accounting professor. And I got into a good PhD program and was about a month out from that start, and we were still looking for housing and stuff. And I kind of realized that I would rather spend my life doing business than teaching it. Not that there's anything wrong with teaching it, but for me, I really felt an urge to go kind of make a run at it and take, a lot of the good ideas that you read in business books and Wall Street Journal articles and stuff like, and apply it and see if it works, right? So I joined a startup here in Arizona in Scottsdale called CareFX. It was electronic medical records play, enterprise software, and as the controller, because that was my background. So I came in as the controller, but I really wanted to be part of a startup. And it's amazing what happens. So we grew that, a great exit, and you kind of catch this bug to number one, it's a lot of fun working in that environment, and especially to see a successful exit. And also you make a lot of mistakes along the way, and you feel like, I would love to take another shot at this and not repeat some of the same mistakes that we made. So I got another shot, went to work at another EMR play, vertical SaaS play. So it's a medical record built for physical therapists. And they were early enough that I was their first finance employee and built the team and so forth, and had another great run there, a great experience. And all along the way, I remember the first time I saw the founder of CareFX. I saw him walking by one day. I don't know if this is the first time I'd seen him, but I saw him walking by one day, and I thought, wow, that's the founder. I'll never be like that, but it's so amazing to be able to see him, And as time went on and I was able to work at a couple of these companies, I got to realize that in a lot of ways, these are normal people. They're smart and they're hardworking and so forth, but it's not this unreachable state. And I started to kind of get this desire to make a run at it myself, potentially someday. I knew I needed to learn more and so forth, and you have to have the right opportunity. So I went through a few ideas kind of on the medical side through fits and starts, and Fullbay wasn't like just this clean idea that I immediately went to. But a friend of mine had a truck shop, and he was complaining he couldn't find decent software for his shop. And it kind of reminded me of the origin story of WebPT, where there's this woman who's dating this guy who's a software developer. She was complaining that she couldn't find good software to run her physical therapy practice. And he helped her demo the software, realized it was all garbage and I could build something better. And that was the genesis of WebPT. So his talk about not being able to find software for a shop reminded me of that. And we kind of dug into it and started working on that. And this was, I guess, 8 years ago. Oh, wow. And it got to the point where I felt like we were onto something enough that I quit my job at WebPT to go work in a truck shop, and worked in a shop for a year. And that really gave me some kind of firsthand experience of the pain that these shops go through and the problems that they need to solve. So we've been building it. That really helped us kind of round things out and get it ready to finish up the MVP and take it to market. So it's a great experience.
Yeah, so that's awesome. Yeah, well, I love one of the things you brought up there. You mentioned a couple of times was, waiting for the right opportunity. If there's something that I've learned just really briefly over the course of my career is that you can't force something if the time's not right. I made that mistake myself, right, of trying to push something into market too early, or alternatively coming in too late when most things may have already been done in many ways. And the water is really bloody. So I love that you brought that up, especially for those that are thinking about getting into the space. It really is about having an eye for that opportunity and being patient, right, and trying to get there.
Yeah, and let me say one other thing, Jesse, about that is it's not like everybody around me was like, holy cow, that's a brilliant idea to quit your job, right, and go do this. And your idea of the software company, that'll totally work. There's nothing like that. It's, how somebody comes to you with a business idea and you're not quite sure if that's going to work, and do you really want to be the person to break the news to them or not? It's just this awkward kind of situation. That's exactly how it was with Fullbay. It's probably that way with almost every startup, unless the person's done one already successfully, where it's kind of awkward. People aren't really sure what to say to you. Should they let you know this is a dumb idea? I was going into an industry that most people don't even know exists, and if they do, maybe they think it's boring. They don't want to talk about it. Their eyes glaze over when you bring it up and stuff. So I just want to make it clear that it's this awkward phase you have to go through. Probably not everybody, but I would say the majority of entrepreneurs have to go through this awkward phase where you have to be strong and stick with the vision, while probably at the same time being open to people telling you if it's a dumb idea, because maybe it really is a dumb idea that's not going to work. But even if it's a great idea that's eventually going to work, that awkwardness still exists in the early time. So for what it's worth.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. And it is, I mean, that's a fine line to walk, right? Of like being open to receiving feedback that's real and legitimate, while also, having a conviction of what you want to build. It's hard to do.
Yeah, sure.
Well, and I think that's, that really threads well into your story of how you built the company too, because I mean, to me as an outsider, well, I mean, I'll let you tell the story, but I mean, to me as an outsider, you really took a path of just executing really hard. And I don't know all the motivations for that, the learnings that you had that drove you going for so long and bootstrapping to such a point that you didn't have to bring on funding for such a long time. Then when you did, I mean, I don't know the terms of exactly what you raised under, but I can only imagine they were extraordinarily favorable to you, which is the best way to build a company, in my opinion. And so, I don't know how much of that was driven by the fact that maybe you needed to prove that this market was there, because maybe the traditional crowd wasn't willing to rally around you because they didn't understand this market. Is there any truth to that? Or maybe we should just jump into the story. Let's tell the story.
Yeah.
So let's go through that and we can come back to it.
Right. So it's, I think August 2015, and we decided to launch sales, and it was just me and my partner, David, who's today's our CTO. That was it. It was just the two of us at that point. And I didn't even have a chair to sit on. I was cold calling shops from my bedroom floor, literally sitting on the bedroom floor. I remember it was a Monday, and this was it, right? And we made this deal where I gave him some equity in exchange for him quitting his job and coming to work on it full time. And we made this deal that, look, the first money that comes in, you get it until you're made whole with what I owe you. So what we did was, I'm an accountant. So philosophically, I know that there's this phenomenon where when you put an expense on a profit and loss statement and just acknowledge that that's an expense that we have to cover, this phenomenon happens where you find a way to make it work. So what we did was we paid ourselves, quote unquote, by expensing our compensation on the P&L, even though we didn't have the cash to pay for it, because we were both living on savings. We both had a bunch of kids and families and so forth. So we were burning our savings at that point. And then, so the deal was, as money came in, he would get paid back on his comp first, and then I would get mine. And that's the approach that we took. So we started to get customers as the money came in. It went to him, he sacrificed a bunch. It's not like he got it right away, and he didn't get completely made whole for a long time. But that's kind of the approach we took. So we knew what we were trying to, kind of the nut we were trying to cover on our comp. And then the philosophy is, I guess the bootstrapping philosophy, I haven't read a book on bootstrap or anything, but our philosophy was that as the money continues to come in and we can afford more people, we will then plug those people in. And we actually got to a point where we were about ready to finally start paying me. And we found this amazing person became available, who I knew. And so we brought him in and paid him instead. And he came in at a super big discount, and he made a sacrifice too, but that was kind of the approach. So we start selling, and I mentioned that we were cold calling, and at WebPT, our main strategy at that point for marketing was inbound. So doing blog posts, long tail search, SEO type stuff, and then paid search. And somebody had convinced me that wouldn't really work for shops, that cold calling was the way to go. So for the first like 3-4 months, it was just the cold calling. And we signed up a few customers, September, one in October, who then churned out. So by Thanksgiving, we pretty much just had that first customer, and it just wasn't working. And I realized that I needed to take that leap of faith and start spending money on inbound paid search. So I talked to David, we decided to start spending money there, and the leads started coming in on an inbound basis, and things really took off from there. And anyway, so
And this is 2015. I mean,
that was in
inbound marketing. Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
this was still kind of the concept was rolling into the market too. So it's not like it was
Yeah,
1,000% proven, right?
Right. I got some great advice from the then CEO of WebPT. You know, he took a look at our website and he's like, "This is awful. Spend money for a template." So I spent the $42 for a WordPress template, so it looked a little bit better. And he emphasized the importance of kind of getting content out there and so forth. So, it started to work. And here's another thing. Like when we went live with Fullbay, we didn't even have one of the key functions of our application is inventory tracking. When we went live, we didn't even have inventory because the shop that I worked in didn't really track their inventory. And it turns out like 99% of the shops out there needed that. And so we immediately had to start building that. So we were a little embarrassed with the product that we brought to market, but you hear that that's what you should be, right? Like if you wait long enough to not be embarrassed about the product, you probably waited too long. So, and we've just done weekly or bi-weekly releases pretty much since then. It just keeps getting better and better and better. And so anyway.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay. So that continued to escalate, in terms of, the bootstrapping methodology until at some point you decided to raise outside capital. So was that 2018 or how long did it take you to get to that?
Yeah. So by the end of 2018, we felt like we were ready to do a capital raise. We didn't need it to operate the business, but we wanted to kind of throw gas on the fire. There are some other reasons. So we decided to start running a process. The end of December, I guess maybe January 2019, we started a process, and we really didn't know what kind of valuation we would get. I'll just share this. I got some great advice from a founder in town here who's raised a lot of money. And I followed his kind of pattern for raising capital where, you try to get, 12 firms interested on some level, 6 of them at the partner level, 3 term sheets, and then obviously you close one. So 12, 6, 3, 1. And you communicate early on to all the firms you're talking about the date that you want to get a term sheet by, so that you don't get these kind of exploding offers just kind of scattered. So the goal is to get all these in on the same day, and then you can kind of compare apples to apples at that point. And we had one firm that came in early. I don't know if it was a miscommunication or what, way low valuation, exploding offer way before our deadline. And we were like, oh man, is this the only money we're ever going to get? And it was grueling. We finally turned it down, and we ended up getting a way better valuation from multiple firms on our date, and it all worked out. So, but yeah, that was the first money that we raised. So we've always been super capital efficient in how we approach things. One of our philosophies is tools before hires, right? We would rather spend $2,000 a month on a software tool than hire 1 or 2 $15 an hour employees, which doesn't seem like that much money, but that's a $30K employee who's going to cost you at least $3,000 a month. So by kind of like taking that tack, we've been able to really scale well, and we have an incredible revenue to headcount ratio, I guess, recurring revenue to headcount ratio and stuff like that. So we've continued with that philosophy. The idea being that like any capital we raise, we can just put towards sales and marketing instead of like feeding this machine of bodies.
Right. So. Well, and that's such an interesting, I guess side effect is the right word, but the outcome of the bootstrap mentality leads you to a different mode of thinking. I mean, I've seen plenty of companies that are flush with cash, and the primary way they spend it is by hiring people. They overhire and they hire out, right, in an effort to accelerate things, which in many cases, it works to that advantage that things accelerate, but it's hard to step out of it too, and step back into a point where you really are profitable.
Yeah. Everyone's got their own path. I know some companies that basically operate $50,000 check to $50,000 check, right, from these private offerings. And one of the dirty secrets about these private placement offerings is that typically you don't get all of the money at once. It comes spread over time. So it's almost emotionally, it almost feels like you didn't raise any money. And then suddenly you have all these new people on your cap table. And we were lucky to avoid that. Not that that's necessarily the wrong way to go, but we were lucky enough to be able to pull it off bootstrapping. So the other thing, I've heard quite a few founders talk about how they don't necessarily have a financial plan in place that they can use to predict expenses and cash flow and all that. Instead, it's more of a top line. Hey, we're going to grow 100% on the top line, and then we'll hire people based on the cash that we have coming in or the money that we've raised recently. And we've always taken the approach of, and this is probably because of my finance background, but we've always taken the approach of like, we make a financial plan, we know exactly what our headcount plan is, and then we execute against that. And every month we do a thorough review of the financials, all of the operating KPIs, everything in a nice clean package every single month, see what worked, what didn't, make pivots along the way. And then how we have a really extensive quarterly planning and annual planning process, which we've done for years. We use traction is the Kool-Aid that we drink, but kind of like a diet, it doesn't really matter which one you choose as long as you stick with it, right? So yeah, I think that's helped us. That kind of discipline has helped us to just keep this bootstrap mentality going, even when, you know, we've got all these additional resources to execute with. So
yeah, it's awesome. You and I could totally geek out about what you just described in terms of financial planning and measuring yourself against what the plan was. And that's awesome. That's totally the way that I like to look at companies too. It's always kind of baffled me when investors are perhaps off put by relying on projections, you know, and it's like, well, it's our best understanding today of how the business works. Why shouldn't we be thinking through that? Because it makes us better operators at the end of the day. You know, if we actually track ourselves against what we believe our assumptions to be.
Right. You've run into investors who don't like that.
Definitely. Yeah. Just write it off as like, it's all guesswork, you know, and that's fine. I mean, you cater to them in a different way. Or maybe you just don't attract that type of investor at all. Right. And that's probably better for you in the long run.
Yeah. I mean, you definitely deal with different expectations along the way, especially if you start friends and family and then do seed, angel, venture, so on and so forth. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Well, let's go back to that period of time that you mentioned when you were doing cold calling. Okay. Right. I'd like you to, if you don't mind, sharing what your feelings were like during that period of time when you were making so many calls and not necessarily getting the results that you expected. What was going through your head? I mean, you've got a family, you've got a bunch of kids, you know, you're putting, you know, a lot of personal resources into this. Like, what was going through your head?
Yeah. So I had 6 kids at the time. I quit my job. We would do, Leslie and I, my wife, we would do $5 date nights. Right. And luckily we had made some money from these exits that we had just shoved right into savings. So we had runway, but yeah, I mean, it's stressful covering a mortgage, paying for all of the stuff, continuing to pay for kids' lessons and all that. It was stressful. I remember, and we don't have to go into all the details, but man, I remember there's just so many factors. I would just wake up in the middle of the night and I couldn't go back to sleep. It's super stressful. Like, is this really going to work? Especially during, like you mentioned, that cold calling period, until I took that leap of faith and really went in on inbound. I remember I could get people to agree to a demo, but it was really hard to get them to close, right? Whereas on the inbound side, because they were coming to me, it was so much easier to close them because they were looking for something, right? And so that was all missing. I remember one day, so we're in Phoenix, one day I drove to LA for the day, right, to meet with a shop that I thought was right on the cusp of signing up. I took him to lunch, all that, couldn't get him to do it. But I thought on the way, I thought they were still on the cusp. I was going to get them. Went to visit another prospect. They wouldn't even answer the door. And then since I was in town, I was literally like in the valley, like north of, you know, San Fernando Valley. I was literally like, oh man, I'm close to Orange County. I should just run down there. And there was a guy who was selling Vitamixes at a Costco who I knew had used to be a service manager for a shop who I wanted to kind of convince to sell for us. And so I wanted to see him in person. So I didn't really think about it, but it was rush hour, like afternoon rush hour, trying to get from LA to Orange County. Eventually got there and so forth. So, and then drove home, like stopped at a truck stop on the way home to like sleep a little bit, but made it home safely to Phoenix. And that
Big trip in one day.
the shop never signed up. Well, actually, they finally signed up last year, finally. But they did not sign up then. They came back to us and finally pulled the trigger. But yeah, I mean, that's just like a microcosm of it, but super stressful. I'll say my wife was right there with me. She totally got it. She understood exactly what we were trying to do. So if you've got, spouse, partner, whatever, who's on board, that can really help for them to act as a soundboard. One other thing I did, Jesse, was I would try to go every month surfing, at least in the warm months, with a friend of mine, with Steve, and we were continuing to do this during this time. In fact, we did a couple surf. So what we would do is we had a bunch of points with Southwest, so we would just like hop to San Diego on the first flight of the morning and then come back the last flight of the day.
Nice.
Just rent boards and stuff. And that seems like luxurious, but it actually didn't cost that much money. And I remember we were on a couples trip. A bunch of us brought our wives and we were surfing out there. And number one, those trips were invaluable because my friend Steve had his own business too. And we could kind of he was a great support and sounding board. And that really helped me. Even like to take a day off when you're trying to build a business like that seems crazy, but it was actually extremely helpful for me to, how they say like half the benefit of a workout is the recovery period. Like if you never do a recovery period, you're just going to destroy your body. I think the same thing goes with building a company. Half of the battle, I think, is that downtime that gives you a chance to disengage and really kind of absorb. So those trips gave me that. By the way, I remember this. So this couples trip, we were over there and one of my friends asked me, this was a few weeks in, he asked me, so how many customers do you have so far? And I was like, none. And I could feel that awkwardness. Right. So anyway, it all worked out.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That's kind of how that went.
No, that's awesome. I think, trying to understand the notion of that stress when you're going through those early stages, right? I mean, I don't know about you, but personally, I've felt that feeling of, at what point do I persist? And at what point do I need to decide that this isn't working? Did you ever have those conversations with yourself?
Yeah, of course. In fact, I actually had two horses going at the same time and Fullbay was the winner. But yeah, absolutely. So I had the opportunity to buy Carifex back from the company that acquired us in conjunction with, in a partnership deal with Louisiana State University's healthcare division. And
oh, wow.
That deal fell apart, but LSU still wanted to do something. So kind of simultaneous to this, I was able to moonlight, and that helped kind of pay the bills. Moonlight as the CFO of this health tech startup out of New Orleans. So if Fullbay hadn't worked out, I had that one. I've always, how you always kind of want to have something on the back burner, right? I still couldn't resist that even with Fullbay. So yeah, for sure. I mean, I thought about like I'm still a CPA, and to this day, I still have kept up my CPA certification in Arizona just in case, right? Because you never know what'll happen, even though I think we'll be fine. But yeah, it's tough. I mean, I think it boils down to the approach that you're taking. So we felt like we had a path, and that financial planning plays a big role for that. We felt like we had a path that was sustainable, and that if we ever got ahead of ourselves, we could always dial back the expenses a little bit and still continue on, maybe just not as fast as we were going. I think the key is to get to a point like that as quickly as possible. But I subscribe to there's two kind of philosophies out, the lean startup philosophy and then maybe the movie production philosophy, right? Where you just package everything and then take it to market. I think I used that book, Running Lean, as a Bible for building Fullbay. I don't know if you've ever read that one. It's a great,
I have. Yeah.
Where the whole idea is the trick to starting a successful company is being able to pivot from plan A to the plan that eventually works without running out of money. And so as long as you're constantly like willing to like make those little pivots and learn the lessons, you'll probably figure it out, and it may look completely different than what you set out to. But yeah, yes, constantly lived in a constant state of paranoia though, Jesse. Like, am I crazy? Everything's going to collapse. What's going to happen if everything collapses? What am I going to do? And I'm always, even to this day, I feel like that, just constant paranoia. So that makes you feel any better.
So there's no leaving. That's it's never gone.
No.
Well, I think that's fair to understand too, right? I mean, it's like, I think that it's a good understanding to know that the whole thing is a journey and the whole thing is hard, right? Just because you raise money or just because you hit a certain milestone doesn't mean all of a sudden, everything is easy and the stress is gone. It's always there. It just comes in a different way. So it seems, right?
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you specifically too, with your accounting background, there are a lot of founders, I think, that get into building a company, and whether they're B2B or not, a heavy element of every company is selling. You've got to sell your product somehow. And the vast majority of people don't typically, not that they don't typically come from sales, but most people haven't had true experience in sales, myself included. Like, before 5 years ago, I'd never really sold anything officially, like in exchange for real money, and much less something that I created, in exchange for money. So, in your early days, can we examine that for a minute? Like,
sure.
How did you learn the sales mindset? Because, obviously, if you had a co-founder who was technical, you're the one doing all the sales.
Right.
So it had to fall on your shoulders. And if you're going to bootstrap, rule number one is generate revenue. So what process did you go through to figure that out?
Well, and you're right. So there's probably 10 or 11 key roles in a vertical SaaS company. And so my co-founder, David, was doing one of those, and I was doing the other 9 or 10. I sold pest control in college door to door, and I wasn't that good at it. I was like middle of the road, maybe slightly below middle of the road. I just wasn't that good at it. It's not like a natural thing for me, but that really helped me at least know a little bit. And then the shop owner who I worked with, who helped me, kind of convinced me to do the cold calls and so forth. We put together a playbook together that helped me because he had gotten some training on how to sell for his own shop. And then I read a book. Once again, it's just the flavor of Kool-Aid that you choose. But I read a book that I think might have been from Franklin Covey. It was called "Let's Get Real or Let's Not Play." But basically, like how to sell in business. And I read it 2 or 3 times and just like literally just completely trusted in it. So I'm an accountant, maybe not a great accountant, right? And I'm definitely not a great salesperson, but that was enough to start bringing in the money. And by the way, philosophically, I'd rather try to get to revenue as fast as possible to replace those serial $50,000 checks from private placements with actual revenue coming in, because not only does that mean you keep the equity yourself and you get a cash flow, but also that is extremely validating to your product. So as soon as we can get to that, the better. But yeah, that's kind of how I pulled off the sales. So when I was out there in LA, I was super, super willing to fight through the traffic to find somebody else that I could delegate that to, right? As quickly as possible. Somebody who can actually sell.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, that's fair. So how long would you say, I'm sure it's different for everybody, but for you, how long until you were, comfortable with it and kind of had a cadence down that you thought was working?
On sales?
Yeah, on sales.
Probably, I could demo. So if I could get somebody onto a demo, it's the whole prospecting piece that I was struggling with for the first 4 months or so. But if I could get somebody onto a demo, almost universally, they loved what we built. They couldn't believe it, that this was actually available. It was hard to get some of them to close because I had kind of outbound called them. But I would say the product, I was lucky because the product pretty much sold itself. It's almost like you just hold this up and say, do you want this? Right. Mm-hmm. We've learned a lot about sales. I've learned a lot about sales over the years, about the pain funnel and how to, when you only demo to the problems that they have instead of like throwing everything at them. Right. I would say that once the inbound stuff came in, we were really in a groove. I just didn't have enough time to stay on that and do all the other things I had to do. So I would say it happened pretty fast, but that was a virtue of the product being a really good product market fit. And I think working in a shop also gave me a lot of credibility when I was trying to sell these guys, because I've never tried to be like a technician or said I've always been very upfront about that. But I think people resonate with the story of me basically giving up everything and working in a shop, and I can speak the language and so forth. So that helped, like having real groundwork experience. So
yeah, some street cred.
street credibility.
Yeah, that's
A little
right.
bit.
Yeah, well, let's end just on talking about kind of the notion of surviving. You know, I've kind of been I guess it's been a personal philosophy of mine that it's survival first, right? If you can't survive, and surviving not just as a business, but like you as a person, right?
Right.
And that, I mean, that's financially, that's emotionally, that's the whole thing, right? Looking at the long haul of getting a company off the ground. You know, for you, if you were to nail down, you know, a piece of advice for surviving, or several, you know, what would you think is the key to really having the survivor mentality and getting through these phases that are so difficult?
I think you got to remember, you know, the 4 pillars of the human condition, right? Physical, mental, social, and spiritual. And every one of those, you know, we are spiritual beings, right? We need that. We crave it. Physical, you need to take care of yourself physically. Socially, are you still engaging there? And then mentally staying sharp. My philosophy going into this, I remember sitting in the park with the shop owner. We were just kind of talking through this, and I figured there has to be a way to hash out a framework where I can live wherever I want, make good money, and make a difference. There has to be a way to do that. And I think everybody that's starting something needs to have kind of the end in mind like that. Like, what are you trying to achieve? And there's going to be periods of imbalance where you can't, you know, I'm finally eating better and trying to drop weight now. And it's been like 4 years, 5 years. It's been a period of imbalance. It's my fault. I should have been on this early, but you're going to have imbalances along the way. But as long as you can keep your eye on the ball there of what you're trying to get to along the way, you can kind of like try to stay on, get as close to the ideal as possible. So you're going to have to accept that there's going to be some crazy times. And that's where having a spouse or partner or whatever who really understands that and is bought into it helps a lot. So they can help pick up the slack, especially if you have kids or something like that. So just take those, you know, whatever your trip is, right? Take that to make sure that you're having downtime and so forth. Do the best you can. You're probably going to wear out parts of your life a little bit. You should probably have known that before you got into this, but as long as you have something to go for at the end and you focus on, we tell our customers that, and we preach this to our employees, it's our core, this is what our core values are, that we believe people should be able to get into work, get their work done, and then get the heck out of there and have time for family, friends, and personal development. And I believe the closer you can get to that ideal, even while you're building a company, the better. I think it's achievable. And that's been my philosophy. And I think we've been able to come close to achieving that along the way. And it becomes more and more, I think, as we can become more successful. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
that's awesome.
That's the concept.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love, you know, hearing that. Did you say it was your mission or your, like your company philosophy that you just mentioned?
Yeah. One of our core values is promote balance, right? For us, and then practice what we preach to our customers. That's what we preach to our customers also, that we will enable you to do this, make really good money, and then still get the heck out of there sooner than you were before.
That's awesome. I love that mentality. You know, it's, I don't know very many people that would say, I don't want that.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, yeah, it's really good.
Well,
why don't we just spend the last few minutes, just, you know, hand it over to you. And, you know, you're talking to a group of founders that are there or want to be. What would you wish you had known before you got into all this?
I heard a long time ago that entrepreneurism is not for everybody, that not everybody has what it takes. And it's amazing what happens when you get into it. You start to think as you hire these really smart employees, holy cow, what's going to keep them from just breaking off, leaving on their own and becoming my competitor, right? And the reality is most people out there just want the security of a job. They just want to be able to go in and get a job and so forth. So if you have that, I guess, entrepreneurial pull, even though you hear people say it's not everyone's cut out for it, you probably are cut out for it because you're feeling the pull and it's going to be okay. I would say the sooner you can get people in and delegate the things you're just not that good at, the better. And as you hire people, so we talked about like 10 or 12 areas of a software company that need to be covered. And initially, maybe you are covering all 11. Maybe you are blessed and can actually code. I wish I could code. I wish I could go back in time and continue coding in high school when I started it. The one thing I would warn you is the bozo explosion is very real. I don't know if you know about the bozo explosion, Jesse. Google it. I think it's Guy Kawasaki talks about it. As you hire people, make sure, try to hire A players, not settle for B players. And if you have to bring in a B player, then swap them out as soon as you can. But make sure to not be afraid to surround yourself with people who are smarter than you. That is what a true A player does. And you have to be the kind of like the patient zero A player in your organization. An A player will not hire B players or C players. They will hire other A players or A plus players because they're not intimidated by surrounding themselves by smart people. And the moment you hire a B player, they will hire C players, and then those people will have, and before you know it, you're surrounded by a bunch of bozos. You don't want to doom your organization, especially if you're relying on all these checks. So I would just say, be careful who you bring onto the team. Make sure you're bringing on people who can competently do things, ideally way better than you can. Use a financial plan. I personally recommend taking a lean approach. Use the Running Lean book or something similar to that, where you try to get where you're going by wasting as few resources as possible. If possible, bootstrap it like we did. I strongly recommend it because you're right, Jesse. When we went out to raise that round, we were in an extremely good position because we didn't need the money. So I could go on and on and on, but I think that it's easier than ever to start something today with AWS and all these resources available. You don't have to have your own server rack in a data center, for example, which is huge. 10 years ago, you did. 10 years ago, you pretty much did. I think, if you're in America, the American dream is alive and well. And if you're not, the American dream is still alive and well. This concept that one person can make a run at it and do it. So best of luck.
That's awesome. Oh, that's fantastic. Really good advice. Thank you. And I love that you finished on the America thing. You can't read the sign very well, but I've got this sign. Where is it? It says, you can't even read it, but it says, America is too great for small dreams.
Yeah. And that's not meant to be ethnocentric, but that concept, I think, can apply to anybody, anywhere in the world. So.
Yeah, totally agree. Well, thank you, Jake. It's been great having you on. Congratulations on all the success you've had with Fullbay. It's been awesome watching you, and I look forward to see your continued success.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Jesse. Take care. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
See you guys.